The Western governments and their media have been exerting pressure on Ethiopia, using the conflict in the north part of the country as an excuse and supporting the terrorist TPLF. During his interview with INA, the American political economic analyst Lawrence Freeman underscored that Ethiopia has been under repeated attacks by these Western forces due to the country's policy success and its potential in development in the African continent. According to him, some forces in the West which have the tendency to control Africa have used the conflict in the northern Ethiopia as a means to eliminate the government of Ethiopia. He also noticed that as Ethiopia has been making significant military advancement in its counter-offensive against PLF, various Western institutions, media and governments have come out threatening Ethiopia.
Government has been making some significant military advances. Recently it has been able to take over the city of Shire. There are discussions, reports that it may be able to move into Mekelle, the capital of Tigray. And these are important military victories. At the same time, particularly over the last, I would say, 5 or 6 days, almost a week, various Western institutions, media, governments, etc., have come out again threatening Ethiopia if the government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed does not institute immediate ceasefire.
For him, this is the extension of the long-term policy from forces in the West that don't want independent political leaders controlling African nations like the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, adding that therefore these forces have engaged in a constant destabilization of Ethiopia and tried to make the country ungovernable. The American analyst pointed out that forces in the United Nations, European Union and United States want to keep the TPLF around to sustain the divisive ethnic group in Ethiopian body politic.
These oligarchical geopolitical forces, they want to keep the TPLF around. They don't want them eliminated. They don't want them assimilated into a Republic of Ethiopia, even though they probably cannot win militarily or ever resume complete power. But they can be relevant in making Ethiopia ungovernable. Now, if you look at Tedros, the chief of the WHO, you see that his statement really violates his position, and he should be considered resigning because he's clearly taken a very pro-TPLF position. And as a member of a major organization of the UN, this really is a violation because he's very blunt about it.
Freeman also criticized the double standards of the West, repeatedly mentioning the northern Ethiopian problem, that of only Tigray the victim, but they don't mention the millions of people who have been displaced in Amhara and Afar regions. He argues that the West are responsible for the problem in Ethiopia, adding that if there had been full support for the government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed from the very beginning, there would not have been this human suffering.
If the international community, in the West in particular, including Guterres, the UN General Secretary, and others, and Anthony Blinken, and President Biden, and the European Union, if they had supported the government, this would never have reached these conditions.
He also added that this is the extension of the long-term policy from forces in the West he called oligarchical forces, which don't want independent political leaders to control the African nations. He also pointed out that these forces don't want to see the African government developing their nations. The analyst believes that it is because of the success of its policy, as well as its potential for development, that attracted the vicious attack on the government of Ethiopia.
The reason that Ethiopia is under attack is because of its potential in development and its leadership in economic development. So this is not hard to understand. However, what is hard to understand, and which I would hope my friends in leadership positions, Ethiopians, is you have to understand the long waves of history that go back thousands of years of the struggle between oligarchism and what we could either call humanism or republicanism. These battles continue today, and to ignore them as unimportant, to fail to comprehend them, puts you in a weakened position.
He elaborated that despite the war in northern Ethiopia, the country is pursuing a path eliminating poverty and promoting development, including light industry and light manufacturing. He hoped that the country will transform into heavy manufacturing. The progress on the construction of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam and the nation's independent industrial policy in manufacturing parks could be something that could be imitated by other African nations. The American analyst finally said that the success by the Prime Minister and the Prosperity Party have brought about discomfort to those oligarchical parties in the West, and now they are fueling chaos in Ethiopia.